Hello everyone, my name is Becca and welcome to Yellow Cat Studios. Today we are doing another edition of my sewing basics videos. Again, I'm not doing these in any particular order, and I am also not a professional. I am largely self-taught. These are just some things that I think are important to know when you're learning how to sew. For this video, I'm going to be talking about how to read and cut a pattern. You'll see in a lot of my videos, I don't use patterns, sometimes I do. It really depends on what I'm working on and if I have a pattern that works. Today I'm going to be cutting out and talking about the bracers in this butterick pattern. So I'm going to show you the different components of the pattern packaging and the pattern itself. What the different symbols mean, all that fun stuff. So first, on the actual pattern packaging itself, on the back of your packaging, this one's a little bit busy, so I am going to show you one that's a little simpler, just because this has so many different patterns in it. But you're gonna have a few different things on the back of the package that are important to know. So on the back of your package, you're gonna have a section that talks about what is included, what notions you need, and what sort of fabrics you need. So like I said, this one's a bit busy, so we're gonna look at this one as well. So this is for a dress pattern. It has the flat lay on the side here, and then suggested fabrics and which notions you need. Notions are things like buttons, fasteners, ribbon, that kind of thing. For clothing patterns, it'll have the different sizes that are included in the pattern. So most ready-made patterns have multiple sizes that you can cut out. Tells you the measurements for what size you'd need for this particular pattern, how much fabric you need, and the finished garment measurements. So if we look at this pattern again, it tells you up here the different notions you need for each different pattern, types of fabric, and then for each one it gives you how much fabric you need. And then down here at the bottom are the flat lays of the different pieces that you can make with these patterns. Now going inside the pattern, you will have your instruction sheet. Usually comes in multiple languages. So this gives you more in-depth about what you need and how to make each piece, or the one piece of clothing, depending on the pattern. Okay, so I know sewing patterns can be a little intimidating. I probably didn't pick the best one to look at because there's so much going on, but typically it will have a section to show you how to lay out the pattern pieces on your fabric to kind of get the best use out of your fabric. And the nice thing is they will always have like a glossary. So something like this symbol means that this side of the fabric is the fold. I'm also going to be so for real with you. I've never paid attention to things like the nap or the grain line. That is something that was talked about in the course, the online course that I took. Did not stick. And I have never used it. Would my sewing patterns work better if I did? Quite possibly. But I don't know much about that. So your pattern may have something about that. I am not confident enough to talk about that. Sewing patterns will also use shading and lines to show which side of the fabric and which type of fabric you need to be using. This is typical of pretty much every sewing pattern I've used. They have the right and wrong side, interfacing, lining, and underlining. So this just helps you figure out what you're using for what piece. For example, on here, this dark gray is the right side of the fabric. The light is the wrong side, so it's just showing you which side of the fabric you're using. This pouch has a really good view of some of the different types of fabric. So again, this dark gray is the right side of the fabric. The light here is the wrong side. And this dotted section underneath the fabric is the interfacing. And interfacing is just a type of fabric that gives it some structure. And then down here, you see the right side again, and then this pure white is the wrong side of the fabric. Your pattern will have step-by-step instructions for every piece of the garment. In this case, for every different piece made with these patterns. So this is for one bracer, has the label up top here. This is for the other one, bracer B. And if you ever forget which one is which, you just go back to your flat lay and they are all labeled. Putting the instructions aside for a minute, we have the actual pattern pieces. Now, they always come on this like tissue paper. We'll usually have a few different large sheets of paper with all of the different pattern pieces on them. So the unfortunate part is you do have to unfold all of it to find the pieces you're looking for. So because I'm undecided exactly which of the bracers I want to cut out for the project I'm currently working on, I'm just gonna find the pieces for both and see how much fabric I need. Okay, so admittedly I have lost my scissors. I am used to patterns for full pieces of clothes, so there is a lot going on here for me as well. But because the bracers I'm looking for are patterns A and B, I'm looking for those labels. And I also know that I need a remnant and a patch for bracer A and a remnant for bracer B. That's just how they've labeled these for this particular pattern. So typically in your pattern piece, there's gonna be each smaller piece. So let's say you have a dress with a long sleeve. The sleeve is gonna be labeled with typically a letter. So you're gonna look for that letter for the pattern that you're making. Is this making any sense? So because I'm looking for patterns for A, this one is currently upside down, but this is patch A, so I know I need this for bracer A. So for now, I'm just gonna cut out this whole entire square. There's one of my pattern pieces. I'm gonna find the rest of them. All right, so these are my pattern pieces. These ones don't have different sizes, but usually if something has multiple sizes, it will have different lines. In the pattern, you just find the size line that you need and cut along that one. I will also say this tissue paper is really easy to rip, so be very careful when you're cutting it. So some things to look for on your actual pattern pieces. These ones don't actually have them, but there will typically for clothing, there'll be things like notches, which are just little triangles in the pattern, and you want to cut around those, keep them in your pattern pieces. These solid lines are your cut lines. They will usually have seam allowance included. So read your instructions, cut along this line, and then you sew typically 5/8 of an inch away from your cut edge. And that is your included seam allowance. This pattern in particular has a placement line for this extra contrast piece, which you can see just goes right on top there. When you're actually cutting out your fabric pieces, marks like these, you're gonna just transfer onto your fabric. I will typically use my dressmaking pen. This has disappearing ink, so some of these will disappear with heat. This one just fades very quickly. So for this particular pattern piece, these are for holes for laces, but you'll often see circles and things as where to line up different pattern pieces. So let's just say that these are two different pieces and this mark and this mark are matching, so I would line them up, and that's how I know where to line up my fabric to sew it together. Obviously not on this one because this goes in the middle here, but that's just an example. So this is an old pattern piece that I have. You'll see these two matching pieces. You would sew the fabric together where those line up. Just like that. Now this is also all lined out in your instructions. I know it can be a lot, but it's important to be reading those instructions because it makes your life a lot easier. Now another thing that these ones have are darts, and that's what this triangle is here. And you'll notice these circles again. The fabric gets folded in. It's very hard to do on this paper, but it gets folded in and brought together there and sewn along this line. So for actually cutting out the pattern pieces on your fabric, you're just gonna take your completely cut out pattern and place it on top of your fabric. Now, you'll notice that I don't actually have enough of this scrap fabric that I was planning on using for this pattern. It comes out over the edges. Now, this one is actually, oops, a little bit too big for me. It overlaps on the bottom edge there. So I'm going to use this as a guide. I don't want to cut this pattern piece because I want to be able to use it as is in the future. So I can either transfer this onto another piece of paper and trim it down from there, or just kind of eyeball it. The better option would be transferring it. If that's what I'm going to do, I'm unsure. But as you saw in the instructions, they have these flat lays of how the pattern pieces can fit onto a full sheet of fabric. So that'll give you an idea of how to place the pattern pieces to get the best use out of your fabric. You'll want to pin these to your fabric or use like pattern weights, and then just follow the cut lines. This one's particularly easy because there's really no sewing unless you're doing linings and things like that. But because I'm using a faux leather, I won't need to do that. But it'll tell you how many pieces you need to cut for each pattern piece. Like on here, it says contrast, cut 1, webbing, cut 1. So there will be a contrast piece, and from what I understand, webbing is basically an interfacing. So a contrast and an interfacing piece. The instructions are laid out typically right on the pattern pieces, If it's not on there, it'll just be in the instructions. I feel like at this point I'm getting a little rambly, and I don't know if anything that I'm saying is making any sense. But I think I touched on the basics of reading sewing patterns. If you have any questions, please leave them down below and I will try and do my best to answer them. Because like I said, I don't actually know how much sense I made in this video. I hope it was a helpful little intro to sewing patterns and it helped you out a little bit. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it there before I just keep rambling on about sewing patterns. If you enjoyed this video, if it helped you out a little bit, leave a like, subscribe. I will be making more of these. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!